Shit. Shit. No, if it was an addition, it was
1, 2, 3, and then the other one was all 3.
so. What are so you mean? But they have the same column or something like these are vectors. These are row vectors. So basically we have a one column vector with 3, another column with 1. When we add them together, you would get a 3 because it would be union. It would union the keys, and then the only addition operation would be performed on the collision. We did an AND operation, then the result would just be an associated array with one element in it. So. It depends on the operation. So plus formally is closer to set addition, and so therefore is a union operation. And is formally closer to set intersection, and so it's an intersection operation there. Regardless, in both cases, the collision function is only applied where there is a collision. Yes? Well, so the keys are a part of a set, and so they get the union and intersection properties of strict totally order set, which is the intuitive use of union. So. So the only they get we'll get into that a little bit later, but they essentially have the binary operations of a strict totally ordered set, which is equality and less than. Those. Yes. Well, there's a few more. There's another 40 some slides. So. But actually, you've gotten a lot of the good questions here. So the thing, though, to recognize is that there's a lot of choices here, And the algebra you are in is determined by the function that you choose. And that you'll find yourself switching between different algebras fairly frequently. That's how we use spreadsheets. Sometimes we do this operation and now we're in this algebra, and we do this operation and now we're in this algebra. And so that's the big thing to kind of get away there. So let's get into this a little bit more deal. That's sort of the big overall. So I think we've talked about this. That let S is an infinitely strict totally ordered set. Total order is an implementation, not a theoretical requirement. So the fact that we were imposing this infinite strict, that they're totally ordered, that we don't just allow equality, is more of an implementation detail. It is very useful for me to internally store things in order so I can look things up quickly. However, mathematically, strictly, if we just had a test of equality, we probably, all the math hangs together there. All values and keys are drawn from the set, and the allowable operations on them of two values or keys is less than, equal to, or greater than. So those are the three functions that we essentially allow. Strict totally ordered set only is 2, but which is less than and less than or equal to, but you get essentially the third one for free. In addition, we have the concept of 3 special symbols here, which we've talked about, which is the null, the empty set, a least element in the set, and a maximal element of the set. So v less than or equal to plus infinity is always true, and plus infinity is, we're saying it is an element of the maximal element is a part of this set. Greater than or equal to infinity is negative infinity is always true, and the empty set is but like in all set theory, the empty set is a formal member of all sets. So now we'll talk about did that sort of get to your question about the operations that are defined on the keys? Right. So then we talked about the collision functions, and there's sort of 2 sort of contextual functions here, union and intersection, because there's the 2 operations that make sense, and then 3 conditions, less than, equal to, or greater than. That is in order to preserve this strict totally ordered set. Once I go to values that are reals or integers, I have more operations, but if I'm just limiting myself to values that are members of a strict totally ordered set, this is all I have. So that means that you have sort of d plus 5 possible outcomes to any collision function. That is, you could have the collision function actually choose to put out the value of its underlying key. It could produce v1 or v2 or empty or minus infinity or plus or sets of these. So that's a fairly finite choice of results. If we're going to stay in this sort of restricted thing, we have a very limited number of things that can actually happen when you're actually applying a collision function on a particular, where there's an intersection. You have a fairly finite number of things. However, the total number of combinations of these functions gives a very large number, and their function pairs gives a very large number of possible algebras. I did a back of envelope calculation, said it was 10 to the 30th. It might be even more to that, and in fact, it might be formally infinite for all I know. So, but that was an easy calculation. There's a lot of possible algebras. And this is a fairly impressive level of functionality given our relatively small numbers of assumptions that we have here. But we are going to focus here on just the nice collision functions, the ones that seem to feel like they give us intuitively useful things. So we are not going to use keys as outputs to our function here. Okay? We will in some contexts, but for this is so the results, and we're going to say the results are always single valued. We're not going to deal with results, expand our values to be sets of values. But although in certain contexts we will do that, but mathematically let's restrict ourselves for that. We're going to do no tests on special symbols, and we're just going to basically say our collision function can be essentially, if we have v less than v2, the answers can be one of these 5. If it's equal to these, it can be one of these 4. If it's greater than these, it can be one of these 5. So that gives a fairly limited number of possible collision functions. And all these properties are consistent with the strict totally ordered set. And generally, when we handle a value of this, it's handled by the union intersection function first. It never actually gets passed through to this function. All right, so let's move on here. And just as I said, well, what about concatenation? In fact, there are contexts where we will want the results to be, we want to concatenate a couple of strings together or something like that. And, that's fairly supported, I think. The results can be the sets themselves. You would have a new special symbol, which is the set itself. You have now different collision functions. So you have union, and then when a union values or intersect, and then union values and union and intersection. So those are your functions there. And there's actually a few instances, I think we've already showed one of them in one of the examples, where we actually do this. So I just sort of throwing that in there, that concatenation is a concept that we do think about. I don't think we've developed the formalism as richly in a situation where the values are simply single values, but it's certainly, we certainly can do that. Yes? This one here? Yeah, I might have a typo here. I should double check that. So, yeah, so V union that. All right, so that should be intersection, and that should be union, and that should be intersection, and that should be union. So I just got them flip-flop there. So thank you. Full marks to you. We will make that change. All right, so that one is intersection, correct? And this 3 should be intersection. Okay. Very good. We'll check into the SVN, and the next downtime it will be part of your display. Moving on. All right, so one of the things we're eventually going to work towards is trying to make matrix multiply work in this context. Okay. We've already talked about the duality between the fundamental operation of graphs, which is breadth first search, and vector matrix multiply. We continue to want to be able to use that. It's a very powerful feature. And what we find is that in graph algorithms, where we're dealing with things on strings or other types of operations, that most graph algorithms can be reduced to operations what are called on semi-rings. So those are generalizations of normal linear algebra, whereby your two core operations here, what is called the element-wise multiply and the element addition operation, this has the property of being associative and distribute over the plus operation, and plus has the property of being associative and commutative. And examples of this include the traditional matrix multiply plus and multiply, min dot plus, or max dot plus. In fact, there's a whole sub-branch of algebra called max plus algebras, which do this. Another one is or dot and other types of things. So mathematically, semi-rings are certainly well studied, more in the context of specific